Hi guys, so I have been keeping this secret for a long time now. Not really that long, it feels like forever, but just since last summer. This is probably the most requested / asked about look since the movie came out last year, and I've just kind of avoided all those questions because really, I don't know, I just wanted to surprise you guys. So this is my take on the new version of Pennywise, and I really hope you guys like it. I couldn't resist. But I'm incredibly happy with how everything came together. We have quite a lot to go over, so let's jump right in, and I hope you enjoy the video. First off, this is my Pennywise head / bald cap / wig. I didn't film actually making all of this because I was kind of all over the place experimenting with stuff. I knew that if I did a Pennywise look, I had to have the bulbous head, like I just had to. I also knew I didn't want to build up the shape using cotton and latex. I wanted something that could on application day be easier to apply and remove. I also don't have all the resources to make a full prosthetic headpiece, so I just had to get creative. There was quite a bit of troubleshooting with this as well, and I'm not sure that anyone will actually want to recreate this the way that I did it because I feel like the actual process was kind of a hot mess. But I will tell you what I did, what I might change for next time, just in case there are some of you guys that do want to. As always, take everything with a grain of salt and do your own research as well. This is definitely not a professional method of doing this, but it is what I was able to come up with. If you do have any questions that I don't touch on, please leave them in the comments and I will do my absolute best to help you out or at least steer you in the right direction. Another note, if you do end up doing this or something similar, if you apply and remove this super carefully, you could potentially wear it multiple times. This one I ended up wearing twice. Okay, so after a ton of brainstorming and trying and failing with several ideas and materials, long story short, I spotted this latex baby mask at Spirit Halloween, which was like the only completely smooth-headed mask there, but thank goodness because it ended up working great. It's called the Happy Baby Mask, which I think is actually terrifying. But what I ended up doing was cutting the face and ears off, so I was left with just the head, and basically I cut darts up the kind of side back on each side, then used T-pins to pin down the edges of the mask onto a styrofoam mannequin head so I could play around with the shape until I was happy with it. Then I glued the mask back together in that shape using E6000, leaving the back open so it was easier to stuff. And for that I used polyfill, which is what you use to fill like stuffed animals and pillows. And you can get that at Joann's or any other kind of crafty hobby store. You'll have to experiment with how much you actually want to stuff it because too much and you'll really have to stretch the mask down when you're applying it. And with too little you can get weird puckers in the head from empty space, so you just want to find a nice happy medium. The bald cap over top of everything is a plastic bald cap. It's painted with white PAX paint, which I painted very first thing, and the hair is crepe wool hair in the colors fox red and light auburn. If I were to make another one of these, I would go straight for the light auburn because I feel like that's a better match, but I actually started this last year and the brighter red is the color that I had gone with. I used 48 inches of hair total, I believe, which ended up not being quite enough, although I could have definitely applied it much thinner just in general. So I would say that 48 to 60 inches would be about perfect. I used a combination of punching and laying the hair, and I'll try to leave a few links below for helpful videos on that for you guys to check out. Another thing I want to mention is that if you do this, use an extra large bald cap so you don't have to stretch it as much when you apply it. So I've got my white bald cap and I'm detailing it with the Skin Illustrator FX palette, which is an alcohol activated paint palette. So these paints can only be used with 99% alcohol. I've gone ahead and done half already so I could figure out what I actually wanted to do, and here you can see the difference between the two sides. I've created a light gray mixture as well as a warmer kind of peachy tone, and I'm stippling these onto the bald cap starting at the hairline. I've diluted these down by mixing in quite a bit of the 99% alcohol in with them, and I'm using a rounded flat brush because it's just the same brush that I use to mix my colors, but a stiffer fluffy brush may work better for this. I'm also using my finger to tap to fade out the color before it dries. I wanted to create a very subtle, dirty feeling texture, concentrating the most color at the hairline and fading as I move toward the center of the forehead. I'm stippling over with a tan and warm brown eyeshadow on a fluffy brush to darken around the hairline and just a bit overall, then using a ripped up textured makeup sponge to stipple on some of the white paint to break it up. I'll be doing more to the bald cap once I actually have this on my head, but I mainly wanted to get this sturdy stippled texture on there while I wasn't wearing it. So at this point here is what we're working with. To start the application, I'm gluing my brows down to protect the hairs, and I'm wearing a solid nylon wig cap to help keep my hair out of the way since the bald cap is going to be adhered all the way around the head and back of the neck. I'm pushing all my hair up toward the top of my head as best I can to help with the fit of the bald cap. And then you would want to do this prior to putting your wig cap on, most likely, but I'm also gluing down the lower area of my hairline and sideburns and powdering with a translucent powder to hide and protect these areas as well. I'm then going straight in with the bald cap and seeing how it's going to fit / figure out where I want it to fit. I had switched to a smaller mannequin head during the hair punching process, which ended up being a terrible idea because that mannequin head is quite a bit smaller than mine, which I knew but was like, oh, it'll be fine, but it wasn't. So just be aware of that when buying a mannequin head and take your own head measurement so you know what you'll need. They sell slightly larger ones at Hobby Lobby, and they even have men's mannequin heads if you need something bigger than the ones that you just find at Joann's. I wanted to glue the bald cap down just under my brows so I didn't have to worry about that texture. So you can see I was really needing to stretch it since I think this is a size small bald cap. I also ended up tearing the bald cap on one side from stretching it, which I was able to patch, but that's beside the point. The ideal scenario here would be that the bald cap is already fully stretched to how you're going to apply it when you're punching the hair into the cap. Once I know where I want everything to be, I'm using Aide to first adhere the latex mask to my head. And side note here, if you do end up wearing this more than once, you won't need to do these next couple steps the next time around. I'm pulling that mask up and out of the way, then using a flat brush to apply the Aide, starting with the main center area on the forehead, letting it dry down clear, and then lifting over and pressing the mask down over the adhesive, rubbing over top to really press it in. Then I'm doing the same for the sides. I would also definitely recommend cleaning the latex mask with a little alcohol prior to applying it to your face. I did try to cut the mask at an angle to kind of taper the edge of it, but I am going in with the Nigel FX Latex to help blend that edge into the skin so we don't see that line under the bald cap. I'm using a disposable makeup sponge to stipple the liquid latex along the edge, thinning out the edges of the latex as best as I can using the clean end of the sponge, and letting each layer completely dry before applying the next. I continued building it up until the edge of the mask was pretty invisible, which I think ended up being about 6 to 8 layers for me. This is where it's very important that you've glued down your brows well so the latex doesn't get in the hairs and risk pulling them out. I used a hairdryer to help speed up the drying process, and you'll know the latex is dry when it's no longer white. The Nigel latex at least dries down clear until you've built up several layers, and then it has a yellowish tint to it, and this one dries down to a pretty matte finish as well. I'm then gluing down the bald cap, sorting out the placement again before applying any adhesive. Again, pulling the bald cap out of the way and applying the Aide along where I want the edge to be, letting it get tacky, and then carefully pulling the edge up and over and pressing it into the adhesive. You want to try as best as you can not to let the edges wrinkle or roll under, which you can see I didn't really do that great of a job of. Again, I'm gluing down the center area first and then the sides, and then I'm trying to carefully unroll any edges and get some of those wrinkles out. It's not the worst thing that could happen, but it does make blending out the edges a bit more work. Once the front is stuck down, I'm applying Aide and doing the same thing for the neck and behind the ears. I was fine not having to trim mine for the ears, but you may need to depending on your head / bald cap size. And here's where you can see that intense facelift using that small bald cap gave me, if you could only see my head shaking right now. But anyway, once the neck is glued down, I'm using acetone on a cotton swab to cut through the excess edges of the bald cap where needed, and then blending out those edges with the acetone as well, gently rolling and rubbing over just the very edges. I'm then blending out the edges of the rest of the bald cap, and the PAX paint does make this a bit more time consuming. I just had to be sure to change to a clean cotton swab to help clean up any messy edges along the way. You want to be very careful when working around the eyes. You want to use a sufficient amount of acetone, but you do not want it dripping at all. And I would also recommend moisturizing the eye area again before going back in and applying your makeup, since acetone is very drying to the skin. I really like using these plastic bald caps since the edges do dissolve with acetone and you can get a really nice seamless blend from cap to skin. Here I'm fixing up that torn area of my bald cap as best as I can, applying a little Aide to the latex mask underneath, letting it get tacky, then pressing the bald cap over top. Then I'll use the acetone to blend that edge out as well. Once all the edges are blended out, I'm pressing over everything with my Ben Nye Neutral Set Powder to get rid of any tackiness, brushing away any excess. Then moving on to the face makeup, I'm using Ben Nye's Clown White and stippling that all over the face, neck, and ears using a dense face brush. I'm stippling over until I have a nice even layer of white all over, and I'm switching to a smaller brush to apply it to the eye areas and where I had that hole, and then again powdering with the Neutral Set Powder to set in place. Since the white of the bald cap ended up being more opaque than anticipated, I applied another layer of the Clown White to the face, really focusing along the edges of the bald cap and again stippling it to blend into the rest of the makeup, then powdering to set. The benefit of this look is that I actually wanted this makeup to look super cakey, so the layers of Clown White and powder really helped add to that. Then with a medium gray eyeshadow on a fluffy brush, I'm starting to contour the eyes a bit, lightly blending over the lid and into the crease, as well as a little bit into the contour of the nose. With a detail brush and the same eyeshadow, I'm mapping out the very arched brow lines, starting them down near the bottom of the brow bones and curving them up and out so the tail of the brow lines up at a fairly natural diagonal up from the outer corner of the eye, kind of where you would wing out your liner, but maybe a little bit steeper. I'm creating a wrinkle or crease between the eyes as well, and you can make the brows symmetrical if you want to. I tried to get the arches about the same, but went for different curves at the inner part. Still with the gray eyeshadow, on a contour brush now, I'm contouring up onto the temples to start giving the head a little more of a defined shape, taking it above and slightly in from the tail of the brow, blending out up onto the head and back into the hairline. I'm just continuing to take that up until I'm happy with it, and I decided to darken along the entire hairline a bit more as well. I wanted to create a more rounded jawline and cheeks, so the only other contour I'm doing around the face is under and on the chin, shading along and up onto the cheeks to create the look of a longer, more pointed chin to lean into the illusion of his creepy smile. Then blending a little onto the ears as well. Then I'm using a small domed fluffy brush to darken the lids more with the gray eyeshadow and blending under the eye, focusing it the thickest and darkest more on the inner half of the lash line and around the inner corner, blending up to the brow and into that wrinkle I created between the eyes earlier. With a black pencil liner, I'm lining my lower waterline, then with a black eyeshadow, smudging down along the lower lash line using a small smudge brush and setting the liner in place as well. I'm tightlining my eyes and also blending and smudging the liner along the upper lash line, and I'm holding my powder puff under my eye to help catch any fallout as I blended more black onto the lid to darken. I switched to a small but fluffier crease brush to blend it out, and I'm also taking it up into a very soft wing, blending up toward the tail of the brow. I'm blending it out more with a white eyeshadow, then creating more defined shadow using the small smudge brush, and again blending out with a crease brush up along the brows as well to soften those lines. I decided to blend the black down a little further, mainly to the inner under eye to sink those areas in more, and then with a bigger fluffy brush, blending around everything again with a white eyeshadow. Next, using a small liner brush and red eyeshadow, I'm mapping out the red detail lines and the lips and nose. The lines going up through the eyes are lined up with the pupils, and I'm bringing those up into points, making one slightly longer than the other. Then lining down from just under the lower lash line, I'm curving these lines out very slightly, and before I get too far, I'm marking out the corners of the mouth and lips first to help me decide how they'll curve down into the smile. On the top lip, I'm lining where my natural lip line is, just creating a pointier but kind of uneven cupid's bow, and then as I get out toward the corners of the mouth, I'm aligning up just a little bit from my lip line. For the lower lip, I'm lining just outside my lip line, and the corners of the mouth will be just outside my natural lip line as well. I'm really extending the bottom of the lip down toward the chin to try and create that effect that Bill does with his lip when he smiles. I started out smaller because I wasn't sure how far I wanted to take it, and it's a whole lot easier to add more red onto white rather than take it away. I then connected the corners of the mouth up to the lines coming down on the cheeks, curving them out more and then back in to complete the smile. I'm going in lightly at first and then darkening and thickening the lines. These are a little off as well, so don't worry about trying to make them perfectly symmetrical. For the nose, I'm lining across and then around the outsides of the nostrils, again starting out smaller than I think and building out the shape where needed. Once I had it outlined, I went ahead and filled it in as well. This was the trickiest part for me because I just felt like since my nose is more pointed, no matter what I did, it kind of just looked like a cat nose, which I really did not like. To remedy that, you'd want to curve the line that's going across the nose up rather than down or just straight across. And it'll depend on your nose shape as well, so definitely check it from all angles as you go to see what you think looks best. I'm then taking a very fine detail brush in the gray eyeshadow to start creating some light wrinkles on the forehead, following the curves of the brow arches as I move out. Switching back to my contour brush, I'm shading above what would be my brow bone so that area appears more recessed and the brow bone pops forward. And I'm stippling over with a little of the Clown White to lighten it up, making sure to set that with powder before moving on. Sharpening up the edges of the temple contours and then going back to the fine detail brush, I'm creating some cracking details randomly over the forehead, brow area, along with a few on the cheeks and chin as well. I'm using these cracks to help camouflage a lot of the imperfections I have along the edges of my bald cap, and you can do as little or as much of this detailing as you want to. I'm again using a few reference photos to help me decide what I want to do. I'm using a really light hand and just letting my hand waver and just kind of shake naturally as I create these lines to give a more subtle, organic feel. I'm filling in some larger areas with the gray so they appear not quite missing, but a little more recessed. I'm then contouring the nose, and I did this so the contours met down at the sides of the red nose, which I didn't love, and I think it actually added to that cat-like vibe, so I would recommend just contouring along the sides of your own nose lightly and then shading out from there. But regardless, I'm blending that contour into the eyeshadow at the top. Then just continuing to create the cracks, and I added several subtle crow's feet wrinkles around the outer area of the eyes as well, kind of squinching my face and smiling to give me a guide. Then gently blending those out a bit with a small crease brush. I kept getting sidetracked from the cracks, so now with a darker gray eyeshadow on that same brush, I'm darkening the brow lines and then switching to the crease brush with a little of the white eyeshadow on it to blend and soften those lines into shadows and blending over the wrinkles between the eyes as well. And back to the cracks. Here I am getting distracted again and lining in some smile lines along the nasolabial folds and around the smile to accentuate it and give me the look of a permanent smile. Then going in with the gray on a smaller blending brush to concentrate and deepen that chin contour a bit more and shading a little dip up into the center of the chin. And again, back to finishing up the cracks. Some of these, mainly just on the forehead, follow kind of where the skin might wrinkle, so they're a little more purposeful rather than randomly placed. Once I had all the cracks down, I'm blending over with a small crease brush and white eyeshadow to make some of them look more subtle. Then I'm going in with a white alcohol-activated paint on a detail brush to highlight along and around the cracks, tapping with my finger to blend out before it dries, and building up another layer to brighten right along the edges. Adding these highlights will give dimension to the cracked areas, making the cracks and shadows appear more recessed and popping the highlighted areas forward so the skin looks more textured and uneven. I'm also highlighting right along the underneath of the brow lines to again bring those areas forward, blending out with a little of the white eyeshadow. Then I'm lining the brow lines with a black liquid liner to define, and if you don't want them to be quite as defined since his are just indented, I would just go in with a darker gray or black eyeshadow on a super fine detail brush to deepen the shadow right through the center. Then finishing up the highlighting along the cracks as well as along the wrinkles around the eyes and the outside of the lower part of the smile lines. Then I'm shading out onto the crow's feet using a little of the gray eyeshadow. I'm using a dark red liquid lipstick to fill in the lips and nose and line along the red lines. I'm resting my fist under my chin and using that to balance my painting hand, and I'm starting these lines slightly thinner than I want them and thickening as I go, and when needed I cleaned up any mess ups with the white alcohol activated paint. Then going over all that with a brighter red liquid lipstick, focusing that mainly in the center of the darker red lines and areas. I decided to go over the center of the lips and nose with a red lip gloss as well, just to add some shine, but ended up nixing that the next time I did the look because it just got all over my teeth. The next time I did, however, add some white highlights along the inner edge of the extended lower lip to create an illusion of shine, and I did that along bits of the red lines as well, which you can see in the photos and intro. The last thing I did was lightly spatter a light gray alcohol activated paint, and I'm using my Delium Tools spatter brush to do that. I did this all over the face and head just to add a little extra touch of texture. These are my teeth that I custom made for myself using a few very helpful tutorials, which I'll link below, and I modeled these after, obviously, Pennywise's normal, pointed, uneven front teeth. And then for lenses, as always, these were provided by Samhain Contact Lenses, and Chuck was awesome enough to create 2 pairs for me for this look. One normal yellow pair, and then one with the blood red around the outside edges, which I absolutely love. If you didn't know, all Chuck's lenses are completely hand painted, and I'm just always in awe of what he's able to create, and if you do want to check them out and support them, I believe there's a sale going on now through Halloween. I don't make any money off of it, I just wanted to let you guys know in case you did want to check them out, so as always I'll have them linked down in the description. The blood I used is My Blood Mouth Blood in the standard yellow red shade. It comes in a few other shades as well and is mouth safe, and this I picked up from Friends Beauty. The costume I made from ruffles to tassels from scratch, and big thank you to my friend Allie for helping me out and basically drafting a whole new pattern for me to work with. The boots I painted, but originally they were just a plain white boot that I found on eBay, and the pom-poms I found in an Etsy shop. Although I can't really tell you how to make it all, I'll try and list a lot of the resources I used that helped in the making of the costume if you're interested in any of that. But I think that's finally everything. So I really hope you enjoyed the video and learned some things, especially from all my mistakes. If you do have any questions, again, please leave them below and I will do my best to help. Don't forget there's a ton of info waiting in the description box. Thank you always for watching. You guys are seriously the absolute best, and I will see you in the next one.